Thank you for joining us on the fire team outreach at Medan and West Java, Indonesia, which took place on September 3 through the 20th, 2005. Our journey was by divine appointment. We received a word of knowledge, Medan. I Googled and found that it was a city on the northeast side of the island of Sumatra. I asked the Lord, when do you want us to go? The following weekend was the start of the Full Gospel Businessmen Fellowship International World Convention in Houston, Texas. And the first two people that we met were Full Gospel leaders from Indonesia. They invited us to a conference in Bandung, which gave us the time frame to go. We applied for visas and were turned down 3 times. I told John Smoke that God would make a way for us to get into the country, and he did. God also gave me a vision before we left the USA. Slide 2. 1 year before our arrival to Indonesia, on December 26, 2004, a tsunami occurred off the coast of Sumatra on the Indian Ocean. Due to a platelet shift on the ocean floor, that precipitated an earthquake followed by a tsunami. The Christians weren't allowed to celebrate Christmas, so they went up into the mountains. The lives of the small minority of Christians were safe while the tsunami destroyed the coastline. Bodies covered the coastline. Christian disaster relief teams gathered in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport to deploy and help the Indonesians. I was told that only the Christians went to help, whereas Muslims didn't send relief teams from Jakarta to the capital city of Indonesia. Here's a picture of the flooding, and many were dead there on the coastline. So why Indonesia? National news coverage of December 26, 2004, the earthquake and tsunami that devastated the northern area of the island of Sumatra. Visited with relief teams at the DFW airport that were going to Sumatra. We had friends that assisted in the relief effort in Sumatra for 4 months. This was an unreached area with the gospel. God put love in my heart for the people. So where is Sumatra? Here, if we look right in the center of this map, we will see that Indonesia is made up of an island of 15,503 islands, but the main island that we were on was the island of Sumatra, and it is a very long island, and the tsunami hit, or the earthquake hit with a platelet shift about 20 miles off the coast of Sumatra, which created an earthquake and many devastations of the people along the coastline. And also other nations were involved, such as the area of Sri Lanka, part of India, and also as it wrapped around that of Sumatra, also hit Malaysia very hard. So here's a detailed map of northern Sumatra. So vision for Medan. John 4:35. What I saw was an isometric drawing of a domed water tank, and John 4:35 says, "Are there not 4 months and then the harvest? Lift up your eyes and look onto the field, for it is white for harvest." And what I saw were men in white robes sitting around the water tank. And Joshua 6, "For the city of Medan to be like Christian, to be a Christian majority. So the Lord provided workers, FGBMFI, Christian businessmen, Christian church leaders and congregations. An American and African joined our fire teams. National events taking place while we were flying to Medan. Air disaster the day we arrived in Medan. Change in, and what happened was a change in regional government. Peace agreement with the Aceh and Indonesian government. Muslims closed 40 churches and blockaded others in West Java. And 3 Christian ladies were sentenced to 3 years in prison for sharing their faith. So here are these news articles that I just mentioned that I had taken from the Jakarta Post. Here was the plane crash upon our arrival. That morning there was a flight leaving from Medan to Jakarta. 149 people were killed in that devastating accident. The governor Rizal and Nurdin, the former governor, was among the dead, and there were others of the government which were killed on that flight. So I would like to mention that also occurred while we were in the air is that a peace agreement was arrived with the rebels of Aceh with the Indonesian government. This was a 3-decade war between the rebels and the government. Bush supports the peace accord, and here is George W. Bush meeting with the president of Indonesia, and with President Sulo to discuss the Millennium Development Goals. So during our arrival in Bandung, Christians were holding services on the street as churches were blocked. The Christians were jailed, and John and I were flying into Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, and a man drove us by van from Jakarta to that of the meeting that was to be held in Bandung. There was a major court hearing during this conference. And here we see Christians that were on trial for inviting neighborhood children to a gospel presentation and had written parental permission to attend. Members of the Islamic Defender Front were bussed into the court hearing and demanded the death of the individuals and threatened the judge that he and his family would be killed if they let the defendants off. Here are 3 medical doctors that were jailed. Many of the prisoners were ill where they were. The ladies prayed for them, and God healed them. And many of the inmates prayed to receive Jesus. So the question I have, are Muslims fair and peace-loving? The answer is no. Mainstream Islam in Ahmadiyya in Indonesia, which means Islamic branch of Indonesia. So law blocks church growth. So minority rights in Indonesia's multi-religious society. So in 1969, there was a law passed that blocked church growth. The president signed into law that all new churches had to have a permit. 0 permits had been issued. If the residents signed a petition, the Islamic Defender group would come and kill them. Here's a picture of John with 2 of the flight attendants of Malaysia Airways. Here I am sharing the vision with local churches. My interpreter is Paul Wakari, standing to my right. Here we're commissioning the church for marketplace ministry. Here we're worshiping with local believers, seeing the vision. What had occurred is as we were driving to lunch, and I looked right before we got to the mall, there were men in white robes sitting around the mosque. And it was the same people that I thought were sitting around the water tank. My wife interpreted the vision, and she said, Douglas, the Muslims will be receiving living water and converting to Christianity as described in the book of John, chapter 4. Meeting other brothers at the Asian African Convention in Bandung. This was a gentleman that I had dinner with, Masad Depan, and he was a major contractor and was in the process of building shopping malls in both Vietnam and Cambodia. And his testimony not only appeared in the Voice magazine for Indonesia, but also was on the a full page article of his testimony in the Jakarta Post. Here we're opening the training meeting with a testimony, training businessmen in Medan, and here we're meeting with other fire team members 11th through the 19th of September 2005. Here John is meeting with business men and sharing a business seminar. Marketplace ministry. Leaders and students of Campus Crusade, 9 universities in Medan plus colleges, businesses, drug rehab, hotels, restaurants, prison, hospitals, and meeting with Christian churches and having rallies. So here we are meeting with leaders of Campus Crusade and students at North Sumatra University that we met with in a classroom. And while we were meeting with them, the shutters of the room were slamming back and forth. We recognized this as a demonic attack, and we bound the spirit of witchcraft over that room, and immediately the slamming of the shutters stopped, and peace of the Holy Spirit came into that classroom. Here is a lumber area business that we were invited to come and be a part of. And while we were there, the reason for the invitation was that their quality control members, when they went into a certain part of the plant, the witch doctors were putting curses on the men. They were becoming deathly ill. And the president of this business, or owner of the business, asked if we could pray over their business to keep these curses at bay. And I said, yes, we would be delighted to do this. And we did. And they were the people were able to go and inspect the areas and were not plagued with illness. Here is the leadership team of that lumber business. We visited drug rehab centers and shared with them the gospel. Here we are at Methodist Hospital, and John is praying over a lady. The man in the front is the administrator of the hospital. He's president of the Full Gospel chapter for hospitals there in Indonesia, in the city of Medan. Here, John is praying for a lady there in the hospital, and not pictured. I'm going to describe it, is a man with a half-inch tube in his windpipe. I asked the man if I could pray for him. I could see terror in his eyes, and when he nodded, it was okay to pray for him. I knelt by his side. I started to pray. John was at the foot of the bed, praying in tongues. Nurses filled the room. There wasn't any room left in there. And when I stopped praying, the patient stopped breathing. I thought, what have I just done? Then an explosion occurred, and all the infection and cancer shot out the tube and passed right by my nose. It was a horrible smell, and I thought that's must how our sin smells to God. The man was smiling, and he prayed for salvation. And as he did, all the nurses bowed their head, and everyone in the room prayed for salvation. They witnessed God's healing power, and other hospitals began to invite us to pray for their patients and staff. And here we are praying for business leaders, praying for churches, ministering to churches at rallies. And here we're praying for administering the baptism of the Holy Spirit. People kept coming forward and for individual prayer. Here we're having lunch with the new governor, Rudolph Perditi, and his wife, Vera. And Rudolph was the director or the governor for Medan from 2005 to 2023. Mr. Perditi asked us to wait while he was talking with the president of Indonesia on the phone. And as I was walking through the house, there was a picture of Franklin Graham praying for the family in the dining room. Rudolph apologized for the long wait and invited us to lunch. He asked if we knew about the permit requirement for new churches. I said yes. Rudolph said that anyone who wanted to build a Christian church, he would give them a permit. He said that he had placed a radio tower in the territory that only broadcasted the gospel, and he was distributing $3 radios that could only connect to his towers. He also visited with investors in Singapore to rebuild the coastal fishing fleet that was destroyed during the tsunami of 2004. Each boat captain would receive a radio, which was only programmed for only one channel. He ordered an architect to build a seminary on the border of Aceh for the purpose to train pastors to do the Great Commission. We were absolutely blown away. Here we are having fellowship with members of the Full Gospel Businessmen. And another picture of that. And John has his arm resting on the liaison connector, all the Christian churches there in Medan, and his name is Paul Wakari. And here we are at a banquet rally Robert, my interpreter, also pastored a large Indian church, and he asked me to preach at his church. And when I did, I closed the message in tongues, and Robert repeated exactly what I said. God closed the message in their native language. That was the first time of my life that when I closed in tongues, I was speaking in the native language of the congregation. Here we're celebrating fire team outreaches, closing banquet, ministry at the closing banquet. And here it's an awards banquet. And here I'm holding up receiving the Team Leaders Award for the outreach. So we have a farewell dinner that they gave us. And many of these are business owners of fairly big businesses. So what did we accomplish? Thousands heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thousands were ministered to and received salvation, deliverance, healing, and baptism spirit. Established long life relationships with the Christian churches and businessmen. We saw part of the vision come to pass. Here's a picture of Christians saying thank you to us. And here we find a man in the front row that had his legs cut off by Islamic rebels who cut off his legs with a machete. So they are under severe persecution, and we need to pray for them. So what would you give God? Would you give God 1 week? Will you commit tonight? Mark 16:15, and he said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Thank you for joining us today for this exciting outreach that we had to Indonesia.